DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy, family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Against the Boards. Chamberlain Bauder here with you. Thanks to my producer, Paul Russo, for getting us up and running. And as we get into things today, we're officially at that transition point of the fall as we go from the lacrosse season into the hockey season, which fully crossed over last weekend as we had the final game of the PLL taking place on the end of the weekend of the Sabres Prospect Challenge. So we'll get into both of those things today. I will have more technical analysis for you based on the lacrosse game. I was also working at Hobart and William Smith this weekend, so a couple less opportunities to be, out watching Sabres games, and I was not going to make it all the way out to the Harbor Center to watch those games. But we'll get into what our takeaways actually can be from something like that after years of me going to that event and covering it and having takeaways and them being right or wrong or whatnot. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, we'll go into the lacrosse world. The New York Atlas take down the Denver Outlaws 14-13 in the PLL Championship game. Mike Pressler finally gets a trophy as he's in the PLL, and it feels like it's one of those things ultimately for Pressler where nobody really wanted to say it, but there's a whole lot of drama with 2007 and the Duke men's lacrosse team, which he was the coach of. And there's a whole lot of accusations that had come out with different things. He was the person who took a majority of the fall for that situation. He was immediately let go from Duke after that season. And then now he's gotten this opportunity after having coached some Texas high school lacrosse, being back in the PLL with pros. He's clearly a guy who knows how to lead a group of men and get them to follow him. And so with that, he finally gets his trophy. Trevor Baptiste finally gets his trophy as a Atlas since the first season of the PLL and stuck it out. And I didn't want to pull receipts up today because I have already done that in the last month and I don't feel like I need to gloat that hard. But I did in fact say that if the Atlas win convincingly at the face-off dot, they will win this game. That's what I said. Trevor Baptiste was 22 for 30, 73% in that game. We all know who wanted it. He also had 10 ground balls. But that was a massive game between him and then Tyler Carpenter and Brett Makar switching back and forth on the wings as the LSMs for that. They dominated the faceoffs throughout that entire game. They dominated possession. And unfortunately for the Denver Outlaws, Logan McNaney didn't find magic until the second half, and that offense didn't find magic until the second half. And right when things started to get rolling for the Outlaws at the end of the third quarter, they scored 3 goals in a row. Logan McNaney made 7 saves in the third quarter, and then it was just a completely different game after that. Gavin Adler and Brett Makar and Michael Grace all absolutely shut down on the defensive end. And on the offensive end, in lieu of Xander Dixon going out with an injury that could potentially alter his career, and we'll hope that's not the case, an injury that clearly jarred his best friend on the field in Connor Schellenberger, they had another ball-dominant attackman who could shift right down that was playing midfield all the way up until that moment in Matt Trainer, and he did just that. He is, in my opinion, the unsung hero of this game. There's zero doubt about it. A hat trick in the second half of that game from a rookie in the PLL Championship game. Now, given with that, Jeff Teat scored 3 goals, had 3 assists, had 6 points, indefinitely the MVP of this game. and he was given the crown for that. But ultimately, I just think what Traynor came into and was able to put together late, forcing slides to go to him and being able to completely change the identity of the Atlas offense in the second half because of the way they had to respect his play after he scored his goals. And his third one came after they were already giving him that respect for his shooting ability. Anybody that wants their upstate New York connection to Matt Traynor played for Jeff Tambroni. I feel like that's enough for us Hobart fans, lovers of Finger Lakes lacrosse. It should be, honestly. And so ultimately in that one, for me, the other key upstate New York guy, Michael Grace, played that game. He was getting picked on, there's no doubt about it. When you look at the way that their defense lines up, though, you've got Brett Makar. Gavin Adler was the Defensive Player of the Year this year. Brett Makar used to wear number 1 for Maryland. If you understand Maryland, you know what that means. And Michael Grace is the third defender in that bunch with Tyler Carpenter in at LSM. Actually, he's the other LSM, but he was playing down low close a lot in this game against the Outlaws just because of matchups. Rexroad was up against Brendan O'Neill the whole game. He ultimately isn't going to have a stat line that reflects well for him in that. But the polls for the Atlas made up for the fact that ultimately, as I was watching this one, Danny Logan was the only short stick defensive midfielder that could make a serious impact in this game on the Outlaws. And early on in this game, all of the Outlaws' goals were coming from those midfielders that had short stick matchups. It was Dalton Young, it was Jonathan Donville, it was Justin Anderson. They all scored basically on either Krevsky or Camizio throughout that first half. That's how they stayed in the game. And then things completely changed when ultimately Denver realized that wasn't enough to get it done. Logan McNaney turned it up in the third quarter. Their offense found some footing in the third quarter. And then from that moment on, the polls just locked down and Denver couldn't get back into a game that was successful in any way. And they basically got fully shut out before the game could really be more entertaining. I won't lie. As I watched this game, I got to halftime. Like I said, I had to work that morning, so I wasn't able to watch it live. I watched it in post, got the notification of the score, was very frustrated that I got that notification while I was watching the game. But so then I'm sitting there at halftime and I'm like, how is this? What's the most entertaining way that we can get to the final scoreline of 14-13? And it technically wasn't the most entertaining way to get to that scoreline. I'd formulated the way to get there in my head that would have been the most entertaining. And it ultimately had enough lead changes, but at the end of the day, the way Denver got shut out of that last, ultimately all but their last goal of the third quarter came with a minute and change left. Then they were shut out until the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. 10-minute shutout. The game was over by the time that they scored that one-pointer. It was already a 2-goal game, and the Atlas spent the last minute of the game just throwing the ball around. Like into the air, literally, to kill clock off because they knew that their defense could hold Denver from scoring a 2. It was way more dominant in the end than a 14-13 game would reflect. It wasn't dominant. It was the championship game, but it was a more comfortable win than a 14-13 win for the Atlas, that's for sure. Liam Entenmann made 14 saves in the game. He had one of his saves, that the most outrageous save, didn't even count. And it's funny because this is always the thing that happens with lacrosse. All of the coolest things that happen don't actually count in the game because it's just like the free play in football. When the flag gets thrown, a guy's like, oh, well, I guess I can just take this shot now. And then in lacrosse, it doesn't count because you have to go back to before the flag was thrown for half of what happens, depending on, how close it is to the whistle. There was a crease violation. And Liam Entenmann was dead to rights on the ground, made the initial save with the pump fake, and then shot back up over his head and fell down to make a save. And it didn't even count because Jared Bernhardt stepped in the crease. It was simply outrageous, though. He played an awesome game. if there is my biggest takeaway from that game still, and I think it's something that the broadcast even said, these two goalies are the example and are the example for every young goalie in the sport of lacrosse. If you are a field goalie and you want to learn how to play the position, watch how both Logan McNaney and Liam Entenmann play the position. It is fundamental. It is amazing, and it is the way that everyone should learn how to play the position of goalie. Blaze Reardon is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but ultimately his style is completely unorthodox. It is not the way kids should be learning to play the position of goalie. Liam Entenmann's reactionary play and Logan McNaney's ultimately communicative and dominant play to asking for what he wants are amazing. And there was an awesome stat that they had in that game that they came out with. It was saves above expected, which is basically those dead to right saves that happen on the crease, which means they're completely reactionary saves. Logan McNaney and Liam Entenmann both have the highest save against per expected percentages in the PLL. That's who you should watch. And the best part about it is, who did Logan McNaney watch his entire childhood? Brett Queener from Penn Yan, the first Rochester Rattler goalie that we all love from upstate New York. Pre-John Galloway there, actually, which I love also. So that's going to do it for our lacrosse talk with the PLL as, Atlas finally champions. And the thing that I talked about last week is also true. The other receipt that I could have pulled if I wanted to. This whole concept of like a team that literally has two guys from 2019 on it having a narrative that exists is so stupid. And it is, because they're champions now and it's over. So Atlas reigns supreme. New York on top. New York technically would have been on top. I would have claimed the win either way, because it would have either been the Rochester Rattlers on top and I would have brought my helmet in with me today, or I'll just hop on the New York train like I am right now. But also Jeff Teat and Connor Schellenberger are awesome to watch. Any attackmen, those are clear fundamental guys that you should be watching. Now let's get into some hockey. It's the first time in a while that we're actually going to talk about it. The Buffalo Sabres Prospect Challenge happened over the weekend. They hosted it at the Harbor Center in Buffalo. The Sabres, Blue Jackets, Penguins, and New Jersey Devils. Oh, geez Louise. I don't know why that became a jumble in my mouth. But New Jersey Devils all playing. And so this is the thing with the Prospect Challenge. When you're trying to draw takeaways from it, whether you're a fan, whether you're a reporter, whatever it may be, the real only defining factor of a Prospect Challenge is someone that is clearly dominant, appearing to be a man amongst boys. It's really the only time that you can look at the Prospect Challenge and go, either this guy's going to have a great AHL, actually, I wouldn't even say a great AHL season. That's how you know he can go and make an impact potentially in the NHL. He can be a fringe NHL guy, or at the very least, if he's a defenseman in the Sabres situation, he can go be a top pair or second pair guy for the Amherst for at least 2 years, the way that Nikita Novikov is. So at the end of the day, when we look at this Prospect Challenge, the hopes that everyone had going into it were we would see something good out of the first round pick in Merca, which ultimately, he's gigantic. He was the 9th overall pick, and he absolutely dumped a Blue Jacket. That clip is really cool on the internet if you want to go searching for it. But ultimately, my thing that bugs me when people talk about defensemen in the Prospect Challenge is everyone wants to cling to stats that they can attach to how good a player is. And unfortunately in hockey, aside from plus minus, there isn't really anything on a defender that's going to like give you that strong paper example of, oh yeah, look how good they are, unless they're an offensive defenseman. Which I'll be honest, at this point, is a surplus for the Sabres, so why do they need more? So with that said, it's kind of just a hard thing to draw on. The other area where people were hoping to see something was from in the forward room. Of course, Consta Helenius, the first-round pick last year, played with the Amherst all of last season, and now at the Prospect Challenge. And the other guy, of course, the AHL Amherst leader in points, Isak Rosen. Now, the unfortunate thing, and this is where the struggle of coverage on the Prospect Challenge comes into play, I didn't see anything talking about their performances in the Prospect Challenge getting posted by anyone at all. And I feel like that ultimately tells us exactly what we need to know about how the Prospect Challenge went for them, unfortunately. Now, could someone randomly be sitting on that and like waiting to talk about it? Sure, but ultimately, if Isak Rosen popped off in a way that didn't show up on the stat sheet, it would still be getting pumped through the Sabres social media that he's that type of player, because that's just how it operates. That is not what's happening. So, with that said, who did step up? The undrafted free agent, the third-line center for the Rochester Americans and fourth-line center last year, Riley Fiedler-Schultz, coming in clutch. I mean, ultimately, this is just the most Sabres thing ever, I think. I kind of love it, though, really. Looks like we've got our new Brandon Biro. That's literally what this feels like. I love Brandon Biro. Don't get me wrong. I was very close to buying a 10 jersey from the Rochester Americans, but that's what this feels like completely. Unfortunate for the Sabres that their top end prospects did not perform the way that one would want them to, but at the very least, I still think Isak Rosen will find his way to an opportunity in the NHL again this season. It's just a question of what he actually does when he gets in there, and we already know now what he can do in the AHL. So if that stays, good for the Amherst, and just keep hoping that he does better as he goes on. And then the other thing with Helenius is ultimately his size is just not completely, I don't think, ready to immediately transfer to the NHL. Obviously, Zach Benson went straight to the NHL, and that's the 9th overall pick. That's what's going to happen there. But I think Helenius with another year in the AHL getting higher line minutes, which ultimately in a Michael Leone system with the Amherst is not, he's going to get the same minutes on the third or fourth line that he's going to get on the first or second line, but getting those pairings with more skilled guys will do better for him. Keep rolling on the Sabres front, as today, this morning actually, was Sabres on the ice for a practice, and thankfully we got some coverage from the social media sources of shout out to SaberSource for giving us the lines that were played on today in practice for the Buffalo Sabres. And I think a decent little bit that we can read into with this as we go, and thankfully have the asterisk notes at the bottom. So first, as we show this, Alex Tuck day-to-day right now, Jordan Greenway week-to-week. And in the comments, their thought process with how it will look, which is technically just speculation, because right now what we see is how they actually were on the ice today. What's in the comments is just speculation about when people get back from injury, clear separation there. But top line of Norris, Thompson, Benson honestly makes sense to me based on now time with the team for Norris making his way onto that first line. Second line being Kulik, Doan, and Quinn. And that's where they see Alex Tuck making his way back into this lineup. Makes sense also there to me. When I look at this forward lineup and the way that it stretches out, I just, I mean, there's a couple things that pop into my mind. Of course, the other note is that Geertsen was playing defense in the AHL last year, and he's currently at that fourth line forward spot, which makes me go, maybe there is an opening for, a couple of different types of guys here, but ultimately the first name that would pop into my head that fits a body type that could go into the line there is Brett Murray. And I just don't think that he's played the right hockey to earn that spot at this point. So that is the case with the forwards as we go through it. That third line, ultimately, I constantly still think about Matthew Savoy too often now. I won't lie, when that trade happened, I thought it made sense. And now, a little more removed from it, I'm just scratching my head a little bit. Then we take a look at the defensive pairings out of the Sabres for that group. It's Byram and Dahlin on the top pair. Of course, Dahlin at this point, the one taking it for the team as a second left-handed defenseman, because at this point, the Sabres have decided that they're more focused on the skill of their defensemen than having right-handed defensemen on their lines. And I just hope for everyone's sake that that fourth pairing doesn't have to see the ice. Depending on injuries, we'll see how that ultimately all breaks out for the Sabres. But we aren't going to pull it up, but there's been quotes from the NHL or from people in the NHL. Actually, I think it was an anonymous source, which makes it even better, Paul, doesn't it? But I think it was an anonymous source that said Dahlin is as good as Cale Makar, but ultimately he plays for the Sabres. So, SOL, he is. Yeah, that's today's practice lines, though. Ultimately, as it breaks down, we'll keep filling you in slightly on Sabres, but ultimately, once a season in Rochester kind of starts, we're going to be very much focused there and talking about who gets sent down and who has the prospect of getting sent down, who has the prospect of getting sent up, more than we'll be talking about those lines. So, honestly, that might be like the only time that we actually do look at the prospective lines for the Sabres this season. But before we wrap things up on the Sabres, let's take a look at the position battles to follow in training camp. Also, shout out to SaberSource for giving us some good storylines to get in behind for the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the first one, I honestly don't think should be much of a storyline unless Yuri Kulik really is dominant. I think this should be Norris 1, Kulik 2, McLeod 3. I think this is solely dependent on where Yuri Kulik's development is after another summer and after having played a full season in the NHL. Could very well slot himself into that top line, but I just think at this point, with the way that this next conversation will go, I think they're kind of relevant to each other a little bit, and we'll get into that next one right now, which is first and second line wingers. Honestly, I just don't see the scenario where they put two first round, or honestly, I mean, it's just going to be a hard case altogether in my mind with Quinn or Benson on a line with Yuri Kulik, because I think too many teams in the NHL are just going to see the opportunity to try to absolutely body kids. Unless you put that on the second line, which is where the prospect of it being Quinn and Kulik on that second line makes sense. The other thing I said to Paul before we got started is I won't be too surprised to see Zucker possibly making his way onto that second line just because of availability at some point early on in the season. With that said, I think Benson definitely has the skill to be on that first line, be a first line NHLer. So ultimately, you get Thompson off of center on that wing, Benson, Thompson, Norris, I think that actually is a good first line in the NHL, at least for what the Sabres can get together right now. God, it's just sometimes painful to talk about this team because it's just like you look at the first and second line centers, and we're talking about guys that are in their first 4 seasons in the NHL and a guy that got brought in to be veteran help last season after they got rid of one of the guys that went with the Edmonton Oilers. So it's just whatever. Cool. Keep it rolling. NHL crease time is the next conversation. And actually, the way this one goes in my mind, the thought here is that the goalie moves over the summer open up the opportunity to just let Devin stay in Rochester. I think at this point, another full year in Rochester for Devin Levi would be kind of offensive. Because, like, what's the point of having him come into the team where he is when he did 2 years ago now, and then you're just going to let him... You had him in Buffalo when he came out of college, and then you're going to send him to the AHL for 2 full years. Like, you're not going to let him face NHL talent on a regular basis. You're not going to let him get used to that. I don't get it completely, but I don't get paid to be an NHL developer, so here we are. And I think there's the prospect that we'll see a lot of Devin Levi in Rochester again this year, which honestly, as the person here covering the team in Rochester more than we covered the team in Buffalo, I'll take it. That's fun. That's exciting. Keep it rolling. The impactful rookie potential to follow in training camp, no doubt that it would be these three of Rosén, Hellenius, and Östlund. I think, honestly, that this is, again, up to the same conversation as Kulik. It depends on how much more they developed over the summer and can make an impact in training camp, how much they can continue to increase their size through training camp is definitely, it's always a conversation when we have European wingers. It literally is. And I say wingers because I mean, Östlund can definitely play center, but tell me where you're putting Noah Östlund in at center when you already have the first conversation of position battles that are going to have to happen. So it'll depend on size, but I mean, I think Östlund's probably, as long as he converts well to the position of winger, if that's what they're going to do with him, I think it makes sense. If not, I think he'll be a great first-line center for the Rochester Americans this year. And he could be an absolutely fantastic first-line center for the Rochester Americans this year. We'll keep it rolling to the fourth-line winger conversation that they have of Danforth and Mallenstein. Kind of not really a relevant one. And then the seventh defenseman, let's be real, that battle is, can you be better than Jacob Bryson? Shouldn't be that hard. Good luck. Yeah. Good for the Sabres. Let's see how the Amerks look next year. It should be fun under the second year of Coach Leo and company. Now, the thing that is going to be exciting with the Amerks as they get into it, possibly the best jersey in hockey this year, period. Who doesn't want a Red Savage Americans jersey? Are you kidding me? Signed to a 2-year AHL contract, Red Savage is officially going to be a Rochester American. He played with the Sabres prospects at the Prospect Challenge, but I am way more excited to see him in red, white, and blue. Ultimately, that's something we'll probably get into next week, is I'll probably try to put together some sort of perspective lineup from my brain, not just from the internet's brain, of the Rochester Americans, what we could potentially see there. And yeah, I mean, there's certain little aspects that are going to be very exciting for the Amerks, and it all ultimately depends on how well the prospects perform for the Sabres. Let's put it that way. Let's not be negative Nellies about this anymore, because I've been negative long enough about the Buffalo Sabres. But ultimately, that is the conversation through training camp. That's what we'll get to see, how these younger players perform, how their size increases impact their performance, how much time they spent shooting a puck, how much time they spent skating, whatever it may be. We'll have to stay glued to Twitter pretty much, though, and hope that we get some good scoops from the beat reporters on how things are going out there in Buffalo as things keep on going. Keep your eyes on the Amerks Instagram page if you want updates, though, on the prospects. There will be significantly more information on prospects from the Amerks page than there will be from the Sabres page. Just be ready for that. That's just kind of the way that early season NHL goes. And as we say that, speaking of early season things, NLL announced their schedule home openers. That's a good sign, but we still do not have a CBA signed, so keep that in mind as the NLL season will continue to unfold. But that's going to do it for us here from Against the Boards. I was just realizing I should give a shout out to Ryan Smith, who I shouted out on my Instagram, who scored the most stupid number of goals that have ever been scored in like a calendar year. And I want to get the actual number right, so I'm going to go pull the Lax Mag article, or the Lax Mag Instagram post real quick as I'm looking at it, because for the Nighthawks, he was number 2 in the NLL in goals with 49. And I knew that. In the playoffs for the Six Nations Chiefs, he had 39 goals in 16 regular season games. He was first in that category. He had 16 goals in 9 playoffs games, which was tied second, and he had 14 goals in 7 Mann Cup games. Michael Carvelis, please stop talking about the Six Nations Chiefs buying the trophy when they were led by the least famous guy on their offense. I love Ryan Smith, but he's still the most underrated forward on that offense. There's zero doubt about it. He is right-handed on a team with Dane Smith and Lyle Thompson. And he led the Mann Cup in goals. They weren't bought, period. Done. Love you, Ryan Smith. Shout out to you. Going to be a great another season for you as you get to roll straight from the box, back into the box, and just keep on rolling. And that will do it for us from the Against the Boards podcast today. Big thanks to my producer, Paul Russo. I've been Chamberlain Bauder. We'll see you next week.